Welcome to Supernormalized, where we dive deep into an inspirational story about Jonathan Aslay and his life. Jonathan is a dating coach who specializes in helping people find their way to true self-love by encouraging the understanding of your own self-worth. Jonathan is one of America's leading midlife dating coaches with over 200,000 YouTube subscribers. After facing an unimaginable loss of his son, Connor, in 2018, Jonathan embarked on a profound journey uncovering vital truths about self-worth, self-love, that many singles overlook in their pursuit of partnership. In this episode, we'll explore what drew him towards this path, and then also the exploration of self-love and the importance of that in being authentic in life. On with the show. Looking at the statistics that I have for YouTube and for my podcast apps, I have a lot of listeners and viewers that aren't yet liked and subscribed. So if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. It's free. And if you're on a podcast app, please give me 5 stars. That'd be really cool. It helps other people find these great conversations too. Thank you. Welcome to Supernormalized, Jonathan Aslay. So Jonathan, you are a dating coach, and by the look of the content that I've looked over for you, you specifically seem to target the women of the population to help them find love in life. Now, we know that love is actually key to a happy life, so you're doing the great work. Tell me, how did you come to this?
So, I mean, I don't think anyone goes to college to become a dating and relationship coach. I mean, maybe a therapist might, but I fell into this by accident after turning 40 and going through a divorce back in 2005. I found myself back in the dating marketplace. And at that time, this was 20 years ago, there was this thing called online dating. And I thought you could just punch in exactly what you want and someone would magically appear. And sure enough, I met somebody on a first date, had a great first date, but something wasn't right. Had another, a few days later, met another woman, great date, something wasn't right, and another one. And I realized that the problem was me. It wasn't like at first I thought the problem was the women, but I realized the problem was me. I was going through a contentious divorce. I was going through a lot of emotional issues. I was going through financial issues. So online dating actually became my drug to help medicate. But here's what I mean is like all that communicating and connecting and, was almost kind of a substitute for therapy. But what was happening, CJ, is I was building friendships with people and communicating with women, sometimes not even dating them, just talking and listening to their stories. And then they would reach out to me and say, hey, Jonathan, would you look at my dating profile and help me make it better from the male perspective? So I would do that. And then a few weeks later, I get a phone call from the same woman. Would you look at the guy's profile and tell me what you think about the guys? And light bulb went off on my head, and I'm like, I could coach people helping them with online dating. And that was birthed, like 17. I mean, I've been doing this full time for 15 years, but it was birthed 7 years ago.
Oh, that's huge. I can relate to that story of being in part of the online dating scheme way back when. This is many years ago. I did some online dating myself, and I found myself meeting lovely ladies, but no one matched. And it was really odd at the time too. I remember sitting there with one lady, and I'm thinking, you're really lovely and everything, but I've got to say that I'm not hearing anything that's coming out of your mouth.
What was coming out of her mouth?
She was just talking, but because I was still processing everything to do with the relationship that had broken up, months before. I just wasn't there. You know what I mean? So it took me a while to realize that I wasn't ready for dating. But I think a lot of people get on to the app straight away thinking, I can fix this with somebody else.
Yeah, I've done a lot of study on human behavior in the last, 20 years because of my divorce. I'm fascinated particularly with human pair bonding. That's why dating and relationships are so curious to me. And what I've observed, because I speak to a demographic of people in midlife, which is, I say, after baby making years and before retirement, so most of the people I work with are between the ages of 42 and 69, 75% of people in that age demographic that is single and dating are divorced. Divorce comes with it the unraveling of our emotional tapestry with another person and our physical tapestry. And in many cases, as you pointed out, we may not be ready for a relationship. We may desire companionship. We may desire connection. We may desire sex. But how many people can really dive in to a partnership-based relationship. And so this is where casual relationships have been birthed. It used to be, at least when I was growing up, it was like kind of like take it or leave it. In other words, it was either marriage. There was no real casual dating. It was either serious or nothing, or it was hooking up, one night stands. But now casual relationships are birthed because many people don't have the capacity to go all in with someone else. They want the companionship, connection, and sex, but they can't go all in, emotionally speaking. Or physically speaking, quite frankly. Because at midlife, financial resources plays, and I'm adding to this conversation, but our capacity to generate resources changes as we age. Do you blend your resources together? I mean, these are really radically complex conversations couples have, and they can end up making or breaking a relationship.
Definitely, absolutely, because as we change over time, there's a lot more things to consider in relation to aging and how we actually relate to the world. Yeah. So can you share the pivotal moment in your life that inspired your journey into midlife dating? Was there anything that actually triggered it beyond the conversations that you were having with women and they're reaching out to you to coach them? Was there something else, or was that all of it together?
Well, it's interesting. Now, as you shared that, it's like the memory bubble is coming back for me. I had briefly dated a woman who was a very well-known internet marketer. And for about 5 months, I was behind the curtain looking at her world. She was a mindset coach, or she still is. Mindset coach, internet marketing coach, that sort of thing. As I said, I was behind the curtain looking at her business. And at that time, I was like, after our relationship ended, I thought I could coach. Like knowing her created the opportunity for me to start to explore this. And I made friends with many of her friends so I could reach out to some of those people to get some guidance. So I would say she was a pivotal part of my journey because like I said, I got behind the curtain to see the coaching industry that I wouldn't have otherwise. Like back then, internet marketing was like the Wild West. It was like in 2007. It was still, green compared to today. And that was a pivotal part.
Now, you've had some tragedy in your life as well that actually guided you down your path as well. So how did the loss of your son, Connor, if you don't mind talking about it, shape the understanding of love and self-worth?
Yeah, so for those, really quickly, in 2018, I lost my 19-year-old son to an accident. And I remember, sitting with that emotion, for a few weeks. And as I was giving his eulogy, I looked at everyone who was, our family, our friends. I said, look, we can grieve with suffering or we can grieve with love. And what I meant was we can lean in and celebrate his life. This was for me, to celebrate his life and to recognize, I knew he would not want me to suffer. So at that same time, I had been, prior to him passing, literally months prior to him passing, I began reading A Course in Miracles. And one of the spaces within the Course in Miracles is a miracle is the shift to love. So in a way, I made this choice to shift from suffering to love. Now, did I suffer? Did I have pain? Do I still have pain? Absolutely. It's not that the loss doesn't go away because I miss him. But I don't allow myself, through that experience, I started to recognize that we can invest love into ourselves. And as shortly after he passed, I started to write a book about self-love. It's behind me. You can see a copy of it behind me. And that was a catalyst for change. But believe it or not, that wasn't my big change. Or let me reframe that. That was a shift for me, but I went through a deeper pain years before that.
What was that about?
So when I was going through my divorce and I was online dating like a fiend, I'll be candid with you, at the same time I lost my high-end corporate paying job. I was going through a contentious divorce, and then the market crash of 2008 happened.
Wow.
And I got wiped out. So I lost my high-end corporate job. I got wiped out financially. My identity was obliterated. Did I say that right? Obliterated.
Yeah.
And for years, I was in emotional distress. That's why the online dating was almost a drug for me. It was a self-medication. It was way to avoid my emotions and my feelings for years, for almost half a decade. And there was a period of time where I went to bed wishing I didn't wake up. That's how painful it was.
Yeah.
So this is when, in around 2009, 2010, I began doing personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy to build the emotional scaffolding, because I was emotionally a train wreck. I was in so much emotional pain. I didn't have a job. I was struggling financially. And by the way, just to give you some context, when I was married, I lived in a $2.2 million home. I had that $250,000 job, and then boom, I had to move in with my mother and father at age 47, and that was demoralizing.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I share this because the work I did from that time till about the time my son passed away actually built the emotional scaffolding that I could navigate the loss from a different vantage point. I could navigate the loss from a place of love versus, if I didn't have that emotional scaffolding, I'm not even sure I'd be here today talking to you.
It sounds like you've discovered a big truth, which is that the path to real love experience in life is through deep self-love as well.
Self-love gets a bad rap, by the way. And when I think of self-love, I think of self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-reliance, self-discipline. It's a lot of words, self-words encapsulated in love. But the reason why it's love is we all have a little inner 6-year-old inside of us, an emotional 6-year-old that wants to feel safe, wants to feel seen, wants to be heard. And many of us have significant childhood wounds at a very young age that haven't been properly processed, healed, grieved, that sort of thing. So self-love is really the adult within us taking care of that little 6-year-old inside of us, going, you know what, I've got your back, you're going to be okay, I'm here for you, kind of thing. That's what self-love is, in my opinion. It's all those words that, I said before, but it's taking care of the little inner 6-year-old so we don't feel as scared.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a misconception, as you say, around all of those self-words in that for some reason our society says that selfishness is bad. But if you don't look after yourself first, then how can you look after others? There is a certain degree to it, right? There's a degree to it. Like if you go too far, then it's self-obsession.
Yeah, it's the oxygen mask on the airplane.
That's it. That's what I was thinking.
You got to put it on yourself first before you can put it on a child. And that's
exactly
really what this is about. Selfish people who are only care for themselves at the expense of someone else, I don't think that's cool. You can do whatever you want as a person, but I just don't think that's very cool. But at the same time, having boundaries is a very healthy way to navigate life for self. Having, ambitions for self, all those things are important facets of living a full and rich life.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you explain the connection between dating and emotional health that you discovered through your work?
I love this question. So, it's interesting. As I started to study human behavior, I've kind of observed that the number one emotional health wound most everybody experiences, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not likable. The 6-year-old feels that way, not necessarily. I think the adult masks what the 6-year-old is feeling. And what's interesting is dating and relationships can trigger your shit like nobody's business, because when you're a sovereign being, it's just yourself. The minute you start to engage with another human being, all of our stuff starts to bubble up to the surface. And so what I advocate as a coach is mindful dating. What I advocate is intentional dating, because we've been indoctrinated into this belief that chemistry equals relationship success. And it's all just, rainbows and sunshine and angels singing. And if it feels that way, you're going to be in a successful relationship. And I'm like, compatibility is so not underappreciated, is humans operate almost ambivalent to the need of compatibility in values, in lifestyle, but most importantly, emotional maturity. And we have a population of human beings that are emotionally dysfunctional particularly those out in the dating marketplace. I mean, we have a pretty emotionally weak, poor relationship skills population, and they go into the dating marketplace going, oh, the next person will fix me, you know?
It sounds like from that, with your experience and understanding, you could probably put together a series of questions that could be used as an algo in dating apps.
Well, to some degree, actually in my private coaching, we design, it's an exercise called radical honesty, pre-qualifying your prospect. And
nice.
I used to be in sales, so that's why I use it, pre-qualifying your prospect. But yeah, we design individualized questions for building to really get to know another human being. You see, if you think about what's the purpose of dating, the purpose is to get to the truth of who this other person is and to see if their truth matches your truth, if you will. But humans operate so much based on lust, on limerence, based on chemistry, that we oftentimes wear rose-colored glasses when it comes to the truth of another person. In many cases, people have blinders on, and they hope that, if we just pretend like if we're just not serious about it, it will just all magically work out. So I'm here to encourage some real objective way of approaching it versus the fantasy or chemical way that we approach dating.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've in the past been guilty myself of saying to myself, well, that's a red flag, but let's just put that aside for now. You know what I mean?
We humans have this capacity to take a red flag and paint it green. We can even go, oh, this is a red flag, and we paint it green. But, or we can wear rose-colored glasses. But now, just for your audience sake, I just want to differentiate. A deal breaker is a deal breaker. In other words, if you come across something within another person and it's a no for you, then it's a no. And I'll just use a crude example. I'm just not going to date someone who's a smoker. That's a deal breaker for me. Okay. A red flag could be they were slightly rude to the waiter, on a date. Okay. I mean, for some people that might be a deal breaker, but to me that there might be a reason behind it. So a red flag means ask more questions. But we have a propensity to, if we like someone and we care about them and we have a chemical attraction, we'll take that red flag and dismiss it, but it's always going to be there. It's going to rear its ugly head at some other point.
That's right. Exactly right. What motivated you to write What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway, and what key insights do you hope readers will gain from that book?
Yeah, so coming back to the loss of my son, it was a couple months after he passed away, I'd been blogging about self-love prior to that. And I'd actually been writing a different book about dating. I was actually writing a different book, and I'd go, that book about dating just didn't feel right. I was really immersed with loving myself while I was experiencing this pain. So I just took my blogs that I'd been writing for about a year, encapsulated them in little short lessons about different ways to love yourself. It's a very simplistic book. It's not, let me just be clear if anyone goes out and orders it, it's not overly sophisticated. It's just some 30 different principles. One of the principle number 1 is speak your truth, do it with kindness. Chapter number 9 is if it's sincere and from the heart, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. There's all these little principles of looking inward and trying to make sense of life without the scripts that we've had, and try to look at life from more of a caring way for oneself.
And that's definitely key, because then you can actually go through life in a more authentic way.
Yeah.
How can individuals begin their journey towards self-love if they find themselves struggling with their self-worth?
Boy, I was there. As I shared with you, I went to bed wishing I didn't wake up. And I do believe, there are pivotal moments in our life. I call them humbling events, when we have a humbling event and we have a choice. I think we could choose to suffer or we could choose to love. And so many of us are in the midst of a humbling event, and most of the time it's financial for men, particularly for women. I've observed that men, a man's worth is based on his wallet and a woman's worth is based on her beauty, kind of thing. And I'm not, this aren't my words, this is just my perception of what I see out in the universe. And oftentimes when we're struggling in an area in our life, it's a catalyst for a change or growth. And so in my case, the pain, I wanted to make the pain go away. And it was books like Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. It was listening to Tony Robbins. By the way, there was Tony Robbins infomercials going on. And, I was listening, that was back, 20 plus years ago, listening to Tony Robbins and then listening to Wayne Dyer and Joe Dispenza. And I could start rattling off all these people. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Or let me reframe that. That resonates with me. So one, sadly, I believe it oftentimes takes a humbling event. My hope is people begin a practice well before a humbling event. So that's why I said when my son passed away, it wasn't as painful because I built the emotional scaffolding beforehand, but I had to go through pain to get there.
Right. Do spiritual practices play a fostering... Sorry, I'm going to go back to that. What role do spiritual practices play in fostering self-love and personal growth for both men and women?
I love this question. I believe that there is something greater than ourselves. So to me, spirituality is really a connection to something greater than ourselves. And quite frankly, I think it's a connection to our divinity, who we are, in the scheme of that bigger picture we call God, universe, and spirit, or at least some people call it God, universe, and spirit. So I believe spirituality is a connection to that. Now, I want to differentiate that versus religion. While there's a spiritual component to a religion, there are all these precepts and beliefs that are built into religion. But I think spirituality is a connection to something greater than oneself. And why that's so important is because it's scary believing that we're just it. I mean, I it can be partially because we live in an environment where we're no longer in tribes, we're no longer in villages, we're no longer, predominantly, I'm not saying absolutely, but in a space of there's a greater collective. So I believe spirituality is that space to say, I'm part of something bigger, and it's a leap of faith to go there, but I think it creates comfort when we know that we're part of something bigger.
Yeah, it actually encourages feeling that place in the world, and you're connected to it at the same time, I think.
Yeah.
How can listeners take practical steps today to start improving their self-regard?
Well, I think first and foremost is that if you're listening to this and go, I want to grow and improve, then type into Google, how can I grow and improve? You do a little bit of homework and then maybe listening to a podcast like this or something else that resonates with you. Purchase a book. There's a gazillion books behind me, as I shared earlier, it started with the first book I ever got on personal development was actually metaphysics, was called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. And I read that and I'm like, oh, this resonates with me. And then I got another one. So if you want to begin a practice, start by going to Google and just say, I want to grow as a person. And by the way, nowadays, the AI version will spit out so much stuff that you'll be overwhelmed in 10 seconds. Pick something that just resonates with you.
Yeah, it's easy enough to jump onto a chat, whatever it is, and get that to pop out the top 10 best-selling of all time self-worth books that actually can guide you in the right direction. Can you share a success story from someone who has applied the principles from your coaching or book in their life?
A success story. Oh my God.
You probably got millions.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking that. I'm like, oh, I got dozens. Where do I begin? I can only say that I've read the reviews from my book, and in most cases, I've gotten, some positive accolades. I have a YouTube channel where I produce 4 or 5 videos a week, and I get, a lot of accolades. From that, I've had clients, and it's not about them, like from a dating and relationship perspective, where they go, I got the guy kind of thing. That's certainly a bonus. But even today I was coaching a client and we had an intense session a couple weeks ago where we were working together on something and she had a major breakthrough. So I mean, to answer your question, I get it every day from some sort of message or that I'm making a difference. And I want to say something to that. You know, I'm not teaching anything that is new. In fact, I'm not teaching anything per se. What I do is encourage humans to do the work for themselves. I'm more of a catalyst to encourage to take a leap of faith and do personal development, self-help, spiritual work, to do therapy for yourself. I'm really more of a catalyst to offer, you know, perspective so people go find out for themselves. That's what I'm not like, I don't have this course outline other than for dating and relationships. I have a course outline, but it's more, I'm here to just to talk about, and honestly, I talk about the pain I've experienced and how I went about healing from it. That's what I'm a real catalyst for.
It sounds almost like you're using like a Socratic method to help people to be encouraged towards self-discovery and their own path.
You know, I have to go look up I know what it is. I mean, I actually don't know it by heart, but I didn't realize it until you just said it.
Yeah.
To some degree, absolutely. Matter of fact, even like right now, I'll share something for your audience. You know, as a man who's, you know, a tail-end baby boomer that doesn't have as much in the bank as he wished he'd have and doesn't know if he has enough to retire, and I'm in a relationship and I'm going through emotional, you know, fears and insecurities about my capacity to be able to support someone else, which is a core traditional expectation. You know, men, there's this core masculinity about what it means to be a man, particularly when it comes to resources, and I'm going through a lot of emotional turmoil. In fact, I've arranged, I'm going to meet with a therapist because I want to do an even deeper dive on this. And I'm going to talk about this publicly because I'm not alone. A significant percentage of men are suffering on the inside regarding this wound. Women have their own wound about whether, you know, and so we human beings, many of us are suffering. And I just draw attention to it because I think it's time to break the stereotype of expectations and come at this from a place of love. There's a great book called If the Buddha Dated, and it throws out the gender rhetoric of how we should date. And it's like, how can we date from a heart-centered place versus the gender expectation place that we've been indoctrinated to believe?
That sounds interesting, that book. I'll have to look it up. So what is one piece of advice you would give to someone navigating the complexities of relationships in midlife?
Can I curse?
Yeah, you can.
So I jokingly say, do you know why they call it dating? It's because holy fucking shit, trying to figure out another human being is insane. Okay? And they didn't know how to put that all together, so they just came up with a word called dating, okay? And you know, but holy fucking shit, trying to figure out another human being is insane. Quite frankly, relationships are not for the faint of heart. Like, relationships can test our belief system, it can test our fears, it can test our insecurities, you know, and so it's not for the faint of heart to be in a relationship with another human being. That's why a lot of people in midlife right now are opting for being single and just casually, like now hooking up in casual relationships outnumber serious relationships because there's an emotional and physical responsibility the minute you start to engage with another person. And a lot of people just go, I can handle X, but I can't handle 10X, you know? So, and being all in with someone means going 10X. And I'm just using that as a descriptor.
Yeah.
You know, you have to decide, do you want a life partner? And then really dive into what does that mean to you? What does that look like for you? What are your expectations? How can you show up? I mean, to be in a relationship today requires, I believe, a lot of homework before you put yourself out there. But most humans don't do the work to even know what they want. I'm going to be candid with you. Women come to me all the time. Jonathan, I know what I want. I know what I want. I know what I want in a relationship. And I'm intentionally being dramatic here. But when they go through this proprietary coaching program I created, can you guess what they say every single time afterwards?
What I thought I wanted was not what I want.
Why didn't they teach me this in school? Why didn't my parents teach me this? Why didn't I learn this before? Because we've been indoctrinated in a very, traditional approach to relationships that was mostly based on chemistry equals success. And I think we've learned that's not the case.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it, a lot more moving parts, and it's all power to you for helping discover that for people. That's really cool. Yeah. So is there any questions that you wished I asked that I didn't ask today?
No, by the way, you've done a great job. By the way, some
Thanks.
of your questions, I'm like, and don't forget I have to Google Socratic method only because I just don't know it off the top of my head. I think what I'd like to share with everyone is this journey called life is fascinating. I think this is a fascinating experience. Now, I'm a believer that, our spirit comes here for an experience, and our spirit never dies, our soul never dies. And we do this over and over and over again in different forms. So I think what I'd like everyone to glean from this conversation is that we all have a little 6-year-old inside of us that needs a big, gigantic hug, and we have the capacity as the adult within us to do it. But many of us need help and work, and so I want to encourage getting a coach in your life, getting a therapist in your life, investing half hour, an hour a day in your own healing. That's my invitation for everyone, because as I said before, when we work on ourselves, we're better prepared for those other hiccups that happen in life.
That's definitely key. So, Jonathan, how can people find you, find your book, and maybe take up your services?
Sure. Well, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate great questions, by the way. So my name is listed here, Jonathan Aslay. It's going to be in this recording. You can simply cut and paste it, put it in Google. You'll find me on YouTube. If you're interested in dating and relationships, go to my YouTube channel. You've got my website listed as number 2. My Instagram and social media is listed there. And certainly my book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway, which is at Amazon. You could go to Amazon and check it out. And if I make a difference in your life, please let me know, because I'd like to hear from you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'll place all those details down in the show notes. And yeah, all power to you and helping people find their way to self-love.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. I'll just say goodbye to the listeners. I appreciate all that Jonathan shared. And a part of that story really struck with me when it comes to the understanding of self-love. So I actually wrote down here, the path to true love is self-love. So once you love yourself, others can love you. Makes a lot of sense to me. I want to say thanks again to Jonathan for coming on the show. That was really good. And if you've enjoyed today's show, remember to like and subscribe. It's free. And also to, if you're on a podcast app and you're listening to this, open it up now. Give me 5 stars. And write something nice. And share this to a friend that you think actually would be able to appreciate it. And until next episode, it's bye for now.